Oh, what a lovely sound that is. Those boosters, Jeff, um, they do something for me.
Boosters.
Yes, they do something for me. I don't know what it is.
And it must
Uh,
always be noted that those are that is the sound of a man who built his own rocket to go check and see if the Earth was flat.
hey, by the way, speaking of, I was thinking this week
Good job,
because we,
Ron.
well, thank you, appreciate that. Um, but I was thinking this week, Jeff, you being
Yeah.
a thinking man that you are.
Oh,
Mm-hmm. Yes, I will admit and give credit where credit's due. There aren't many of you.
how
There
dare
aren't.
you?
Yeah, no, how dare you? But
How dare
there,
you?
there are not many of you, but you happen to be one of them, which I am thankful for. But I was thinking this week, with all the money that that guy invested, I'm going to go a little conspiracy theory on you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
With all the money that the guy invested for that rocket, I happened to be um, at uh, Michael's the other day,
Yeah, yeah.
browsing. I had a cup of coffee in hand, shorts, flip flops. I probably look like a complete slob, hair kind of messed up,
Not possible.
incognito, walking
Okay.
around, walking around Michael's looking like a little bit of a weirdo, I'm sure. But I was checking out their like model section, model cars, and I came across the model rockets. And I was reading like the description of them, and some of them go really, really high in the air, really high in the air. And I thought, gosh, if it can make it that high, and it's only like a toy rocket, imagine if that guy really wanted to prove that the Earth was flat, what he could do. And so uh, I'm gonna I'm gonna say that I'm not so sure at this point. I believe that he was actually trying to prove that the Earth was flat.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, because a lot of it just doesn't add up. Just
Shocking.
yeah, very,
Shocking, Ron.
very, very shocking, isn't it?
This is Mad Mike Hughes you're talking about.
Mad Mike Hughes, who built this rocket to launch himself into space to prove that the Earth was flat. And of course, the comments that the one that you read about, bouncing off the firmament. Um, but really, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, uh, isn't there a lot easier methods of uh,
Getting high up in the air,
getting high up in the air and taking pictures and proving that the Earth is flat if you
such as
really
going
wanted
to
to?
the top of a mountain?
Going to the top of the mountain. Thank you. Thank you
Like
very much.
like he didn't even get 8,000 feet, I don't think, which is
No, he didn't get
you can climb
8,000
up
feet.
locally. I think that might be one of the near the peak of one of the mountains locally around here. I think might be around 8,000 feet.
Well, I know Mount Whitney is 12 plus.
There you go.
I know for sure when I lived in Colorado Springs for many years that there was Pikes Peak. That was 14,000
Yeah,
plus,
but
which people go up there all the time. You can go
that
up
does take
there.
a lot of effort though to hike up a mountain.
well, yeah, but people do it all the time.
I know, but
And it,
for Mad Mike Hughes, do you think he's that mad to hike up 14,000 feet? What a
um,
waste of time, too, you when you could just.
shit, what a way. No, yeah, what a waste of time when you could like embezzle money and build a rocket.
Oh, so you're
And
saying it said something like $20,000 was his cost to build the rocket, to launch into space, to get high enough to look down on the Earth and see whether it was flat or not. And you're suggesting a little bit of a conspiracy theory here that he's what, a crook?
a little bit, a little bit. And if he, well, okay, no. Here's what I'll say. If he's not a crook, my gosh, I mean, he's wasting a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort to prove that the Earth is flat when you could, I guess, hike up to one of these high peaks and get much higher than he actually did.
The
Uh,
number is 1,875 feet is what they believe he reached.
so yeah, so I'm struggling with this.
Well, maybe he intended to go much higher, like as high as an airplane.
Um, well, no, airplanes go much higher than that.
No, I'm just saying maybe he intended to go that high or even higher.
As a matter of fact, I was in an airplane on my way to and from Washington D.C. at approximately 32,000 feet, and boy, oh boy, did the Earth look flat.
Oh, so you're saying you didn't even need to build a rocket to prove it was flat?
Well, I know, yeah, no, that's exactly it. As a matter of fact, I didn't have to pay any money to do it at all.
Oh,
And probably a fraction of the cost that he paid to do
to
it,
prove it.
to prove it.
And it was
Um,
certainly flat from up there. You could not
it's
see the backside, could you?
I could not see that curvature that so many people talk about. To be honest, I just couldn't.
Looked like kind of
Um,
like a disc, huh?
well, you as I've asked you a couple times, but you as the mathematician, um, and being able
Wannabe,
to,
wannabe.
no, actually, you are a actually very skilled in that area, Jeff.
Well, I'm a math teacher.
You are a math teacher,
I'm
but
not
you
sure what a
are.
mathematician is, but I feel like a mathematician is one who actually creates some new math, as in theorems or ideas, who does something new or uses the mathematics in the real world rather than just repeating the ideas of others, which is what I do.
Well,
However, I don't actually know
not.
the definition.
Well, let's go into the area of axioms, and we'll use that as an example and say that I think you've effectively used mathematics to communicate something, at least in that area, and in a couple other areas that I think gives you some credibility, at least in my book. And I would say that you're skilled in that area. And I believe that I might even be able to use your skill and your talent and, be able to maybe have a discussion, not at this point, not tonight necessarily, but at some point have a discussion about the curvature, and do the math on it
Ooh,
and see if the math on that actually works out.
all right.
Um, but I'll leave that. I'll leave that for a different time.
While that's simmering,
Yeah.
mathematician, according to the dictionary on Google, is an expert in mathematics. Kind of a definition that doesn't help me out very much.
But
Or
you,
a student, an expert of, I'm sorry, in mathematics or a student of mathematics. Now, anyone who's a student of mathematics is a mathematician then, and that's pretty surprising. That means there are a
well, I
lot
guess
of mathematicians out there.
Well, I guess you've been dealing with a mathematician all for a very long time because I
You
guess I'm a mathematician.
mathematician yourself, yes.
Yeah. Um, wow. Wow. I can actually I can make that claim now.
Now
Thank
hold
you.
on a second though. Now while that is the first definition that came up, I'd rather go with the Wikipedia definition here, which is a mathematician is someone who uses an extensive knowledge of mathematics in his or her work, typically to solve mathematical problems. And believe it or not, that is what I'm referring to when it comes to making new theorems uh, and using mathematics in real world situations. There, that distinguishes them from myself, who is simply teaching people how to do that process. And there is a difference, and I don't know if we care to go into the difference, but I don't know that I'm a mathematician, even though I'm a math teacher and have a math degree and stuff.
Well, you have an advanced math degree and you've been teaching mathematics for many years. And through mathematics, you have successfully been able to have a very reasonable discussion and take it beyond the physical realm and put it into the spiritual realm. So in my book, that's a mathematician.
All right,
So we're gonna say that
fantastic.
Wikipedia, although a an authoritative source, what makes it more authoritative than me?
Nothing actually. You can get in there and type your own definition. You could actually go in
Yes,
there and type Jeff.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's right. And for fun, just as a side comment, I have done that. I was in a dispute with somebody about a definition of a term within mathematics, actually, and they referenced Wikipedia, and so because of that, I went onto Wikipedia and changed the definition to mine during that conversation. So I really enjoyed doing that.
Well, I know somebody that went into Wikipedia and changed the description of a dog to make the dog sound like a very vicious animal for the very purpose of playing a joke on somebody, and it actually worked.
There you go. All right, so we've drifted a bit here. So we're gonna put the flat Earth discussion on the back burner.
Yep.
What else is on the meal plan for tonight?
Well, so for some context, background, if this is the first time you're listening, um, number one,
Email address.
email address. Yes, please.
djronshow@gmail.com. Send your questions, comments, concerns, conversations to djronshow@gmail.com. There you go. All right.
Perfect. Perfect. Now the context portion of it. So the last week, a couple of weeks, we've been talking about a little bit about testimonies, right? Got some
Yeah.
background from Josh, where he fits into that. Then we moved on from there, and we started touching on some of the very specifics, um, and we got into, you know, well, do do we still have permission to talk about Josh? Is that still a thing?
I generally, as a rule, try to be careful about the way I chat about people when they're not present to defend themselves. So that means, of course, we can talk. But I mean, I wouldn't want to like attack him in a way that he couldn't sort of represent himself, if that
No,
makes
no.
any sense. And by the way, I named the title for that show "Differing Beliefs" because that's really what we began to discuss: differing beliefs.
Yes, yes. So, in the context of where we are tonight, we started out talking Josh, although I won't continue to labor on him because I kind of feel the same way. But he is of the mindset, which I think a lot of people fall into that category, that It's more um, productive, more beneficial to kind of talk about the things that we do agree on. And I had stated, and I think you had confirmed in your own way and in a very articulate and good way, had stated that although we tend to agree with that, and there's a platform for that, the idea, the premise behind what we're doing, and the idea behind exploring the universe with DJ Ron. Oh, and by the way, DJ Ron, um, in case anybody's like really missed it, right? Is
Yeah,
Dana, Jeff, and Ron.
that's right.
That's right.
Dana, Jeff, and Ron, the three of us.
Yeah, the three of us. So the idea, the premise behind our show and what we're doing, we're asking questions, we're exploring ideas, we're questioning people's the premise that people present, including our own. So this platform isn't for agreeing necessarily, although a lot of agreeing may happen, but the idea behind this show is not to agree. The idea behind the show is really to ask some questions,
To
um,
explore.
explore ideas, new territory, turn over stones, right, if you
Ooh,
will,
there you go.
dig for treasure, um, look into.
You're good
Uh,
tonight, Ron.
yeah, no, look into the dark sayings. I told you I'm a little feisty tonight,
Yeah, you are.
a little bit feisty. So, with that said, last week, um, if you remember, we had discussed some of the things that, we talked about, the idea of a commune, a community gathering, people, coming together in a way where, we'd say, hey, we do have some common ground here, but there's some fundamentals that really need to be in place before we can move forward. And so we were talking about some of those things. And we were talking more specifically about some kind of key components and key convictions when it comes to morality and things that are important. And we went a little bit into the territory of like taking the life of a child at a very early stage in their life and saying that, if you're in the mindset in that you're okay with that in a civil society, right, we kind of tolerate that. And we I think the three of us agreed that we obviously there's not a lot in a civil society, and we wouldn't want to disrupt anybody's life or hurt somebody because they've chosen to do some of those things, but that if we were going down the road of you know, building this commune, this community of people that would struggle with some of those things and struggle with some of those things being okay with people. Because we said that there are some boundaries there that should be set up, at least according to how we currently feel, right? Is that accurate?
Something or other or around about. Yes.
Is that too vague, or should I be more
Well,
poignant?
I think the direction you're headed towards is how if you're going to be in a community, not just like exist on the same planet, right? But actually be in community with people, that there would need to be some absolutes in a sense, or certain inalienable truths, if that
Right.
may be the
Yes.
way to say
Yes.
it.
Yes. So there's certain things. So long and short of it, that's kind of where we went last week. We went to that area and said that there's some things that are very important to us, and then went a little bit further into some specifics. Dana brought up kind of your exploration of church communities. And more specifically, she brought up one experience that you had where in the community they felt like if you had ever been divorced, that you could not, remarry again. Um,
Yeah.
and so we started talking about those things and saying that, okay, we didn't focus on that one thing particular, but if you take things like that, and then we said, okay, well, what happens then? So we're sitting around the table, right? And we're having this discussion about forming this community and people coming together and working together. Well, what happens though when you come across those things that you disagree with? You pointed out something, um, and think I went back and I listened to the show last week, and you had pointed out something about the I think it was the Bill of Rights.
You can
Um,
think that all you want, Ron,
hmm,
but the truth
well,
is it was the Declaration of
declaration,
Independence.
declaration. Thank you, Declaration
Thank
of
you.
Independence.
Yes,
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 Declaration of
yes.
Independence, and I think Josh had brought up the point that that should be maybe canonized,
Yeah.
and you said, um, which I thought was excellent. You brought up an excellent point. You said, well, yeah, but there's this piece at the very beginning of the Declaration of Independence that actually supports separating and breaking off from people in certain situations. And so we kind of left it there a
It's
little
true.
bit.
And I really do wish Josh was here. But
I do too.
without him here, that conversation led to, so it was about differing beliefs initially, and then it led to a conversation about what do you do when you have differing beliefs. And it was kind of interesting because Josh had brought up the Declaration of Independence, which in and of itself, then the name says what it's doing. It's declaring independence from somebody else. And it became kind of interesting because they did separate themselves based on beliefs and try to create a new community around shared beliefs, which kind of answered our question, at least from one perspective. In that declaration, by the way, there's a whole list of things that they felt were unacceptable. Like I'm reading them right now. For example, they were saying an unacceptable thing is cutting off trade with all parts of the world. So they would say you can't cut off trade with all parts of the world. Or one that, whether you remember it or not, is probably familiar in your mind, just the feeling of it. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. The good old phrase, taxation
Yeah.
without representation. And so
Or
they
as,
said,
or as
you
many
can't,
say, taxation is theft.
there you go. But at least now we have taxation with representation. People sometimes, I think, forget that we can, in theory, not just in theory, in practice, if we were amazing, I guess we could elect other representatives that would then not tax us in the way that we're currently not liking if we didn't like it. But at least here it says we're imposing taxes on us without our consent. In theory, we're doing it with our consent right now because we selected the people that are making the rules. But anyhow, there's a whole list here. Let me see. The word for begins each thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I don't know how many there are things that they listed off as unacceptable. We gotta go our separate ways.
Can you are they bullet point kind of things, or can you talk about some of the other things besides theft and or taxation and trade.
Well, I can read through some. I don't know. Some of them make a lot of sense as background for our current government. For example, depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury. So, as anyone knows, in the United States, we are supposed to be tried by a jury of our peers for felonies, or I'm not sure what level it gets to, but you have to have a trial by jury. That's part of what came out of this. And look at this one:
Yes.
transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. I don't know how that was remedied, other than the fact that you have to be tried here. You can't be tried in some other country.
Hmm.
So I don't know. You could keep going through these. Taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government.
Well, I think without having to,
Plundered
without
our
ha-
seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people.
right,
Those are pretty
right.
good reasons to go your separate ways, huh?
Yeah, no, I would think so. I would think so. So again, the I guess for me, and I think for you, I think for your partner, Dana, um,
Who's
I think
lurking about somewhere.
lurking about at some point she will make an appearance, which will be as always spectacular.
Yeah, for
Um,
those who don't understand, she's here. It's my understanding she's even listening to this conversation. But
that's what's so magical about it, because though it may not feel like it at the time, she will insert herself, and then she's fully understands the context
yeah,
and has actually something to say about it,
yeah.
and something good to say about it. So
Anyhow, so
um,
that's the Declaration of Independence. That's an example of people parting ways based on differences of belief and treatment that
yep.
is seen to be unacceptable. And
So
as I may note real quick, I found that interesting in which Josh were here, because it would be interesting to ask him, do you feel in that situation they really should have just talked about the things they agreed on?
yeah, yeah. No, that would be my question. That's why I kind of brought it up, because I thought it was an excellent point. And my my question would be along those lines as well. So what do you do? What do you do in those cases if it's more beneficial to just talk about the things that you agree on, ultimately? And I talked about a little bit last week about the idea that you have presented, and with axioms, and how they will collide at some point, right? Because you bring to the table these kind of core beliefs, these things that you just kind of believe in, and we've said that that's okay, but there are differences there, and so the question is, well, what do you do with those? And for somebody that doesn't want to have these kinds of conversations, I would say, well, that's okay. You don't need to. I mean, but I guess that's maybe one of those areas where we part ways, right? I mean, that's one of those areas where we say, um, well, if you're not interested in being a part of the conversation and exploring some different ideas, and that's not your thing, that's okay. You don't have to be a part of it. Nobody's no Certainly we wouldn't say anybody needs to be forced into questioning things. And I don't think in our experience, and we've talked to many people over the years, I don't think we've ever tried to force anybody to have
I have.
conversation. Have you? Have you?
Yeah, yeah, but let's not act like that happened. Let's play
Okay.
along like it was it you said. Um,
Well,
we used
I
to
think
street preach, Ron.
yes. Well, yeah, but we didn't lock somebody up in a room and
Yeah,
make them say,
that's illegal.
listen. No, yeah, no, I don't know, maybe if it was maybe if it was legal to do something like that, I
I don't
wonder
think
if
we
we
do it either,
would
but
no, probably
no,
not.
I don't
Probably.
think so. But
Probably.
But anyhow, I don't know. I tend to want to talk to people about things I think are important, whether we disagree or agree. So I do agree. I try to be polite, and I do try to be a human being. But I also have an inclination towards wanting to have a real conversation. And so, honestly, very honestly, for anyone who knows me, for our hundreds of listeners who happen to have encountered me in person, I've gone back and forth over the years. More recently, in the probably last 5 to 7 years, been more not confronting people about real conversations and real things. And
Mm-hmm.
in the probably past 7 years before today, I was more confrontational, and I really can't figure out which one leads towards a better life, to be honest. Because if you kind of, let's call it, get in somebody's face, and I don't mean in the argumentative sense, but I mean in the ideas, you put some ideas out there. It generally doesn't go very well if someone's not that interested. And then if you never bring anything up, you generally don't bring anything up, because if someone's not that interested, they just don't talk about it. And so the phrase comes to mind: damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yep.
And I know that's a long caveat, Ron, but I would say that I'm not exactly the one who doesn't bring things up. It's real, what's the word? It's a real crapshoot when you're talking to me about who I'm going to be tomorrow.
Well, yeah, yeah, no, but I think that I think that's true for most people anyway. So, for instance, the friend that we've been referencing over and over again the past couple of shows, he's published some things on online on his Facebook account um, that have induced conversations, but they have they have quickly kind of gone by the wayside for a number of different reasons, and mostly from my observation, simply he's just not interested in having the conversations in length.
Hmm,
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So, and that's okay. Again, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with. I've come across that more oftentimes than I haven't. Most people I encounter, you probably say the same thing, are just not interested in exploring those things. Now, with that said, though, with that said, the reason why reason one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of do this thing with you guys and have this show, have this podcast kind of thing is because I do think though that there are plenty of people out there that enjoy these conversations and would enjoy having them, would enjoy going in depth. You happen to be one of those, Dana obviously happens to be one of those people as well. And so when you bring in those dynamics of people that do want to explore, do want to poke around, do want to overturn stones, things like that, it becomes very, very interesting. And if you're in that mindset, it's very fun. And it can be challenging, right? Because it's not always things that are easy to work through, as you've had, personal challenges over the years. And I don't mean,
Hygiene. You don't mean hygiene,
I
although
don't
that
mean,
has been a personal challenge.
yeah, yeah. And that's a continued issue for you, if I'm not mistaken. But,
You never told me
um,
that before.
yeah, but, um, the personal challenges are you have to kind of wrestle with some of your core beliefs, and you've alluded to it and made reference to it when we talked about some of the testimony stuff, and I did as well, right, where in our past and maybe even in the present that we haven't really talked about at the moment, where there are some things that you're thinking through or working through personally, that you go, yeah, I'm not real sure what I believe on this right now, and because I have some really good questions that I'm asking myself. Or I have some really good some things that I'm thinking about, some points that I'm trying to get through, right? So these conversations, period, from my perspective, aren't easy in any way. And Josh last week made reference to, he said intuitively that um, he's fearful. And I thought that was a very, very honest assessment of how many people feel, um, including, myself at times, right? It's these things aren't easy necessarily to talk about, right? They're not easy to open up about them, certainly with other people, but they're not easy to talk about and wrestle through with yourself, right? Because they challenge kind of your core, challenge your faith, challenge the way you see things, and sometimes, um, you know, affect the way that you are moving about your day, right? You affect your actions, right?
Yes.
I mean, so, and affect the way that you interact with people and affect the way that you say things to certain people or the things that you would say to people. So, for instance, in the times that you have felt led, or I have felt led to be more bold, and bring up these conversations. So, for instance, when we did street evangelism, right? We would go up to people,
Yeah.
um, strangers that we did not know, and we would, ask them questions, and we would talk about faith and Christianity, and talk about the Bible. And those things are met with sometimes some hostility, right? And not only hostility from other people, but sometimes just, people would throw things back at us that would challenge us, right? I mean, somebody asks you a question, you're out there evangelizing, somebody brings up a good point, you go, hmm. You might not say that at the moment, right? You might not go, at the moment, but later on, you're thinking about it, you're toying with it, and you're going, actually, that was a good point. And it gets you spun off into all kinds of different directions.
Yes.
So, um, at the end of the day, I think personally, as I've stated over and over again, that these conversations are very, very important. Um, we didn't really have um, anything specific that we were going to be addressing tonight. But I
This
did.
there's this wonderful topic about axioms. You say it, but I'm going to guess that 99%, if not more, of people don't know what the heck you're saying. You probably picked up that term from someone you know, namely myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I did.
So
I did.
while I think that there should be a special axiom dedication show or something, but just to be clear, what this idea of an axiom is, it came from my own learning within the field of mathematics where axioms are used. But I realized from that the idea is applicable beyond mathematics, but simply as a way of reasoning through this world in general, or shall I say, exploring the universe. It's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, an axiom from Wikipedia, an axiom or postulate, very, very deep definition here if you want to really tune in, is a statement. It's really any utterance, right? So it's a
Mm-hmm.
statement that is taken to be true.
Yes. Yes.
And here it comes to serve as a premise or starting point for further reasoning and arguments. Very important here. It's a starting point. It's a point of belief in which you take on that belief, and from it you can then reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, I sincerely think most people do not appreciate the importance of this or think they do but may not. But the idea here is that you need axioms, you need postulates, you need starting points if you're going to make an argument. Now, most people, in my experience, don't realize that they need to have a starting point. But let's talk mathematics for a second. Something as silly as 1 plus 1 equals 2, for the mathematician, you don't get to just say, oh, it's obvious. If someone says 1 plus 1 equals 2, why? How do you know 1 plus 1 equals 2?
Mm-hmm.
By definition, the mathematician has to give a reason for the statement that they made. So the statement is 1 plus 1 equals 2. They have to give a reason for it. And without getting into the minutia of it all, it's actually pretty difficult because here's the key. The minute you make a statement, no matter how obvious any person thinks it is that 1 plus 1 equals 2, the minute you make a statement to support why you think that's true, um, Ron, why do you think 1 plus 1 equals 2?
Well, I think 1 plus 1 equals 2, based on experience.
Okay, based on experience. So that would be in a statement. The reason you gave is experience. And so within mathematics, that statement itself would need a statement of support. So then I would have to ask you, why should experience allow me to know this is true? And
Mm-hmm.
then suppose you gave me another statement. And this is not hard to follow. Anyone can follow this if they just trust me and think about what the heck I'm saying because it makes sense. Whatever comes out of your mouth next is another statement.
Yes.
But within mathematics, every statement that you utter has to have a reason, an accepted reason. And
Right.
so what happens here, as silly as this sounds, is every statement you give just simply requires another statement to support it, and it's called the infinite regress problem. And so to solve this problem, you can start with some axioms or some beliefs that, let's say, you, Ron, and me, Jeff, agree on. And if we both agree on this particular statement as a starting point, we're not saying we proved it. We're not saying that we know it's true. We're not saying that this is so obvious that we don't even have to think about it. We're not saying any of that. We're just going to say, you know what? As it says right here, we're going to take this statement to be true. So an axiom or postulate is a statement that is taken to be true. We're just going to accept it as true so that me and you can agree and move forward with an argument. And from there, we can make arguments because we can all both refer back to this agreed upon statement. Now, again, I can imagine people saying, oh, who cares? That's not very important. Well, I think that's all we're doing all the time. I think all of this banter we do, this logic and reason we do, comes back to some sort of beginning starting points of reason, which we actually agree or disagree upon. And it really comes down to those fundamental beliefs and logic applied to it.
So, I mean, with that said, as an illustration that I'm going to point out to this, because I would like to talk about this actually, if possible, if you're geared up for it tonight. But so I started the conversation last week, I believe it was, if you remember, by asking a question, the most fundamental question, as far as faith is concerned, right? To all of us, including myself. And I said, you know, forget about attributes. Um, but at the end of the day, right, at
Yeah, yeah.
the very foundation of your belief, do you believe that God exists? And the reason why is because of what you're stating. So, as an illustration, I'm going to use that as an example to kind of say, you know, I that's the reason why I asked the question, because if we can't agree on that one thing, right? As a starting point. So, the fundamentals. Do you believe that God exists? Now, stop right there. That's just a yes. or a no question. And then from that point, then you can move forward into, you know, what you believe about God and who God is, right? Would that be kind of along the lines of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it would be an application of this approach to reasoning. And so, generally speaking, it would be good to find common ground, as Joshua was talking about, actually, by which you could reason forward from those common things. And if you can't find an area of common ground, or if there's an area of very significant dis similarity between you and the person you're conversing with, you really might want to focus in on that because there's almost, here comes the key, no point in reasoning towards your final conclusions if you're starting from fundamentally different places. While you might end up in similar areas, it's just it might just be better to get back to, you know, the core beliefs here, um, with a small caveat that two people can start from different locations and end up in the same spot within the reasoning process. But when it comes to disagreement between two people, um, talking about those fundamental beliefs is very important. So I thought that was good that you said that. Once that agreement was there, then of course you then have to develop it a little bit more and what the heck each of you thinks this even means.
Mm-hmm.
As a
Right.
huge aside, let me read another line from Wikipedia about axioms that's important because there might be some people out there, you know, with all of our thousands of listeners who hears what I say and says,
Mm-hmm.
that's not what I remember axioms being when I was in class. So it says, the term has subtle differences in definition when used in the context of different fields of study. As defined in classic philosophy, an axiom is a statement that is so evident, shall I say obvious, or well established that is accepted without controversy or question. Um, Here comes the key. As used in modern logic, an axiom is simply a premise or starting point for reasoning. And so over time, the term has kind of taken a few different paths of meaning. And I'm really backing all the way down to that logic kind of one where whether you think it's true because it's obvious or whether you're just saying it's true as a starting point, whatever way you get to it, these axioms become the things you accept as starting points of reason.
Yes, they do. And um, I think Ned pointed something out a few weeks ago, that he said, well, everybody has axioms, even if you don't realize. He didn't say in those terms, right? I mean, he didn't say that's not that's a paraphrase of what he was saying, but
I know what he
he
said.
yeah, you know what he said, but he
He was
essentially
talking about Jordan Peterson. And knowing Ned, I don't even know what he meant exactly, but knowing him, I'm thinking he was making a joke that nobody else would have understood except me. And he was saying Jordan Peterson says that even once somebody utters their beliefs, it may very well be the case that they're not even living in alignment with their beliefs. And so who the heck knows what they actually believe? People can say all kinds of things, but they haven't really worked out those details very well. So he was actually having a side conversation with me prior to our conversation, and I think he was making a joke, and no one else would understand it except me. But what he was saying is, when you asked him what his axioms were, or we did, he was kind of making a jest that Jordan Peterson said, even if we state what our axioms are, those may not even be consistent with what we actually believe. Does that make sense?
well, yeah, no, yes. That and that what you're stating is probably true about the side joke that you were having. But he also said something else, though. He said that sometimes you just don't know what your axioms are.
Yeah, that's what he's
That's
referring to.
yeah, okay, so the same thing. So that being said,
It is
there
an interesting
are
idea.
what no, yeah, no, it is an interesting idea, and it happens to be if you just take observation, in your own experience. And I think you can probably relate to the same thing, but we all kind of walk around, right, with these axioms that are agreed upon in some sense. So, as an example, things that you grow up with in your house as a child, right? There are certain things that you grow up and your parents make statements, and from those statements, those axioms, and from that premise, you just kind of go with it because you're not questioning it. You're not saying, wait, hold on a second. Um, that's not making sense, or oh, that makes sense, but why does it make sense to me? You're not always doing that with everything, right? You're just not. We do accept things. We do um, accept things and have faith in things, but with sometimes and a lot of times without even realizing it, right? I mean, that's a pretty fair assessment, wouldn't you say? I mean, wouldn't
I
you?
would. I would. I do want to just add in one little piece there, and that is that the axiom is the starting point belief. Much of what we do is reasoning based upon those axioms. So while what you're saying, I would argue, is completely correct in the context of ultimately these become axiomatic belief systems, a lot of what we do is we begin with starting points, which are what you're describing, and then we do a lot of reasoning based on those starting points. And that reasoning itself fundamentally goes back to axioms. But um, for example, we drop objects from a very young age and they move, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then from this, we believe in this idea of we now named gravity, right? That things move.
Yep.
Okay. And so from that, we make all kinds of conclusions about the world around us without even really thinking about it, based on this belief that things move. You get what I'm saying? I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say all the different beliefs about everything sitting in this room and all this stuff are axiomatic beliefs. Those are all what are actually called theorems. Those are all me reasoning based on the fact that I believe things fall. So the first thing here is to state that you may not have that many axioms actually, but you reason with them all the time and you create whole systems of beliefs. But furthermore, if I may go deep now, that axiom itself, you may not realize, comes from that you actually think that what you're experiencing corresponds with reality, which is something you can't know with certainty, according to the Matrix movie. Or
Mm-hmm.
Descartes said, "How do you know this isn't all a dream?" And people
Mm-hmm.
have all kinds of thought experiments that say, how do you know anything's really real? Correct?
Right. Yep.
So let's say the actual fundamental axiom, just play with this idea with me for a second. The actual fundamental axiom that you believe that allows you to do so much reasoning is that what I experience moment by moment corresponds with some sort of truth. So if you accept that axiom, Ron, and I accept that axiom, then we can do all kinds of reasoning based just on that one belief that what you and I are experiencing has some connection to what's actually true. Do you get how that's the belief?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
No.
I can then say, okay, gravity exists, not because I believe gravity exists, but because I believe what I'm experiencing is real. And
Mm-hmm.
then I can get all kinds of beliefs about my surroundings just with extensions on the fact that I believe what I'm experiencing right now is actually real. And you and I know, I think you know this, right? There are people who doubt your very existence. They question whether anything is real.
Yes.
And those people, it becomes difficult because if they don't share that fundamental belief that you and I might share, that what I'm experiencing right now has some connection to what's true, well, we really need to talk about that because where do you go from that belief? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I do. And that is, I don't know if you've made the observation, but that's become much more common recently. So you hear that a lot, and people more often. these days, at least, I hear people making reference to the Matrix.
The new
Um,
one, I don't know if you've heard it, I'm assuming, I guess you have, is that people say this is all just a video game system, that we're living
yes.
within a game.
Yes, yes, exactly. Which, fits into, this whole, that starting point though, the Matrix, right? So the video game, this is all a very complex, um and they give, if you're following their argument, if you know how to follow their argument, understand what they're saying, they're giving, within that paradigm, they're giving good reasons, good illustrations why they're believing what they believe. The problem I have, and I don't know if this is where you were going to go, but the problem that I have is that I think somebody should be able to, with those beliefs, kind of challenge, right, what you're experiencing. And I don't mean challenge what you're experiencing, as far as, let's say we're holding the ball, and somebody says to you, well, you know Jeff, if you let go of that ball's not going to fall to the ground. That ball's going to rise to the air, into the sky. It's going to go the opposite direction, regardless of what you've experienced over and over and over and over and over again. And so you can easily say to someone, I think, at least off of just observation, that okay, so let's go with that. This is a video game. Let's do that. Well, in this video game that we're playing, there happens to be this rule, that says that about 99.99999% of the time when you drop the ball, it's going to the ground. And I've heard people say that the ball goes in the other direction, but I'm yet to find somebody that in real life has actually experienced that. So, although it sounds very fancy and it sounds very new agey, right? And it sounds cool to kind of explore, there doesn't have any meat and bones on it, from what I have been able to observe so far. But
I would be interested in discussing it and looking into it a little bit just because people are talking about it.
well, I would
Maybe,
too.
um, and it must have some persuasive element to it because people are clearly persuaded by it. But as a point of illustration, and I know nobody listens to this show, but if they ever did and they were ever talking about these things, they would really understand what I'm going to say next. As a point of illustration, what I'm suggesting, though, is that even though someone can have those conversations about the Matrix, have those conversations about the video games, have those conversations about whether this is all a dream, that's Descartes that was saying that, uh, whether or not someone is unsure about all of those things, the whole idea of the axiomatic method is that one can say, while we still have that conversation open and we still are unsure about the answer, suppose we just assume that what we're experiencing right now is actually real. Let's think about what kind of conclusions we can make with that assumption. And then you would say, hey, Ron, would you agree with that assumption for the sake of a dialogue? And you might say, no, the whole gaming thing is so interesting to me that I could never accept that assumption, right? Or you might say, okay, I can accept that assumption. Let's see where that goes. And then you could have a conversation move forward, even though you're in a place of uncertainty. And that's the
Yeah,
part that I find very, shall I say, leveraging about axiomatic reasoning, is that you don't necessarily have to know with certainty whether something is true or false to take on the belief, explore its implications, and go down its logical pathway to kind of see what that world is like.
that's right.
And finally, on this point, for someone like myself who feels an immense amount of uncertainty on the truest of true knowledge, meaning that while I have all kinds of feelings and I have all kinds of inclinations, uh, absolute knowledge is something that escapes me. At the end of the day, I feel like I must make some guesses. And then once having made those guesses, once having selected those axioms or postulates, I must then live a life in accordance with my beliefs, without knowing with certainty whether they're true. So this is the path I've gone down. I call it a path with an uncertainty. While I'm still uncertain about what is true, whether this is a game or a dream or it's real, I can still make a choice within that uncertainty and live a life according to my beliefs. I hope I'm making sense.
Yes. Yes. No, you are making sense. Um, I I agree. You can explore. I mean, that's kind of, I mean, not everybody's interested, as we already talk about many times, but you can explore. You can go down certain areas, right? You can have a conversation, as you said. You think it would be interesting to explore the idea that life is a video game. You don't have to agree with it, right? To kind of accept some of the premise, right, that they're arguing from. As a matter of fact, some of those little branches that when you start to talk about it, you might even go, yeah, actually, now that you bring that up, that is something that I kind of believe, right? So, you
Yeah,
know,
sometimes you can actually, using this process of reasoning, you can look at the conclusion of an argument. That is, if you assume the axioms and look at where it leads towards, you could find that conclusion appealing and be convinced of accepting those axioms because of the final outcome.
well, I'll
String
give you,
theory is a silly example, but string theory, I don't know anything about string theory. I just say that for now. But I've heard that some of those who are pursuing the theory love the results of it so much that it's almost willing just to assume it. They're almost willing, to, again, I'm putting words in people's mouth. I don't know anything about what I'm talking about, but the results of the idea are so good that some would say, let's just believe it's true, even though we can't verify it. And again, I feel like I'm speaking way above what I know I'm talking about. But for the point of illustration, suppose string theory was to reveal an explanation for everything in such a way that worked really nicely, but you couldn't actually verify the string theory itself. It would almost be tempting to take on the belief, if that makes any sense. I think it's a bad example because I don't know enough about it, but you were going to say before I rudely interrupted you.
no, you can take the string theory and you can go in the same direction that I'm going to go with right now. Let's just take the most uh the topic that a lot of times we could probably agree that we have the at least maybe not the most familiarity with, but we're very familiar with the belief, and that is in eschatology, more specifically the preterist belief. So, for instance, you didn't know, I didn't know, you know, the starting point of exploring that idea and exploring that belief, we didn't know all the details of that. And we heard some of the conclusions that you come to, right, in that paradigm. And he said we thought, okay, well, the conclusion of it kind of sounds reasonable, and we didn't need to accept everything along the way to actually hold that belief. Am I correct on that?
Um, I'm gonna give it a maybe. So long as what we're saying here is that there's axioms which are fundamental beliefs, there are results of those axioms, and that the whole shebang is a view. So you're not just looking at the axioms, but the entire result of those axioms and the theorems, as they're called, whatever. But but all of it becomes what those axioms are. It's a whole train, if that
Hmm.
makes any sense. And so if you take a look at the caboose and you're thinking that's a pretty nice looking caboose, it makes the locomotive maybe easier to accept.
Yeah. Yes. So, uh, uh, again, for instance, and I'm going to use the eschatology thing. If I make, will say that this is an example of an axiom, possibly fulfilled prophecy, meaning that the things spoken of um, in by Jesus and some of the apostles about the end days, that those things were historic events. Um, Many people hold to that belief. Would you say that at its very starting point, right, that can be an axiom?
By the way, you can choose whatever axioms you want. So you could make that air axiom, Ron, but that would generally not be the way this goes, actually. So for example, I could say my axiom is that Ron is the most handsome man that has ever lived on the face of this earth.
Mm.
Okay. But Ron, I don't need to believe that. See, I don't need to take that axiom. All I have to do is look at you.
Hmm.
And based on my belief, my axiom that what I experience is true or somewhat close to true, all I have to do is look at you and I know you're the handsomest man on the planet.
Yeah, and
So,
so excuse me.
Oh, oh my goodness! Thank
I
you.
well, I don't know. I think I got to take issue with that, Jeff. And I don't know if I can participate in this conversation if you're going to assert that. You know what I mean?
Why
yeah.
not?
It just is. I just can't,
Would
Jeff.
your belief, Dana, in your experience having some connection to the truth, lead you to conclude something else?
Yes, because you are number one, Jeff.
All
The
right. So
most
there's a good
handsomest man
axiomatic
alive.
argument. Oh, and actually, this is perfect for illustrating the point, Ron. I could say, well, despite my wife's reasoning based on her axioms, I'm just going to take on the belief that you are the handsomest man. And so what happens here, I don't know if I'm being clear or not. The axiom that starts this off was just that what I experience is somewhere near true. And from that, I can reason up to not that you're the most handsome man in the universe. I'm sorry, Ron, but that I am the most handsome in the universe. And we can actually argue just based on that first belief that what we experience is somewhat corresponding with truth. And but on the other hand, it is true. You can also just take on a belief rather than reasoning up to it. You could just say, "I believe," and then. So going back to preterism or fulfilled eschatology, while one could take on the belief that preterism is true, I would suggest that that's not as strong as working from the common belief that the Bible is describing something. Now,
Hmm.
with the idea, the common belief for most Christians that the Bible is describing something, you can reason your way up to fulfilled eschatology by looking at time frame references, and you would use the scripture and common language to reason your way up to the final conclusion. So I would say while one could just assume it's true, that's not actually going to be very convincing for most people. I think since within the context of Christianity, people are believing in the text. The fundamental belief there is that the text is valuable in describing something true, and then you just reason your way through the text. Am I making any sense right now? I don't know.
Yes, yes, you are. Um, Ultimately, though, you get to you have to you immediately anybody, because we said at least last week, right, when I asked that most fundamental question about, do you believe God exists? Well, unless you're going to, you know sit with somebody and talk to somebody that doesn't hold that axiom, right? And then that can spin you off into a whole different conversation. But if you have four people that accept that, you quickly have to move on to kind of the branches of that and start
Mhm.
talking about, well, what does that mean exactly? Um,
You know what's interesting about what you're saying regarding preterism and that context is that while myself and somebody else may agree that the text is valuable in describing something true, as you and I know, the exact spelt out preterist ideas, let's say, are not there. You have to get there from a long set of arguments, right?
yes,
And
yes.
so there is a bit of uncertainty because you have to extend beyond those branches in a sense, a little bit. And whereas futurism, similarly, I think there's more uncertainty with what they're saying. They have to extend further beyond the text, in my opinion, of course. But either person, as you look at the text, either position is not exactly spelt out. Here comes the key, as I represent it, or as the other side represents it. We're both sort of adding to the text to make a complete conclusion. So the text is kind of like the
Mm-hmm.
branches, but we add on that little extra layer, and maybe there is some little axioms touched on to the end, or a little bit of belief involved. So that the text itself only gives you so much, but if you're going to hold a position, you kind of do, it seems, have to at some point add on a little bit more beliefs. If that makes any sense.
Yes. I'll give you for instance, so um our discussions through the years with our group that we had, the individuals that we had for many, um, well, I won't say many, but I'll say for several years, the premise that was always accepted, right, was that the scripture did hold authority,
Yeah.
and everybody accepted that. And then it got to a point where everybody that said that they accepted the scripture has authority and that it was valid, everybody said, yeah, you know what? Not only do we believe that, but we're going to branch out a little bit. And now we've all kind of arrived to the place where um, eschatology, um, even we kind of got to a point where we said, well, there does seem to be some validity for fulfilled prophecy. There does seem to be, and everybody accepted that. Then from there, that's where you get into some of the other challenges, though. And that's people saying, well, yeah, it's fulfilled, but what exactly does that mean? Do you go off in a hyper preterist direction?
Careful, that's
Ooh,
a heresy, according to
yeah,
many people.
yeah. But do you one of our more active participants at the time, not only did he accept that more hyper preterist kind of view, but he also went into the area where he took action on that to kind of help people uh, that were maybe struggling with that believe it, or learn to accept some of those ideas, right? But not everybody accepted that axiom, or that branch of the axiom, the ultimate axiom, right? Not everybody accepted the premise that hyper preterism was actually factual. There was differing beliefs even in there. Um,
Premise conclusion might be the magic words here, just to help
premise,
versus
yes,
conclusion. Accepted the conclusion.
yeah, yeah. So you can all kind of agree. We can all kind of say, well, we believe the scripture has validity. Cool. We believe it's the word of God. Awesome. What's that mean? Okay, well, what's it saying? Then you get to a point where does the scripture, we'll just put it in plain terms again, does the scripture address like end times kind of stuff? And everybody would raise their hand and go, yes, yes, it does. But when they ask you, well, Jeff, what do you mean by the scripture says talks about end times? And you go, well, when they were talking about end times, they were talking about that first century and the judgment that Jesus was talking about. And somebody, else in the room would raise their hand and go, no, actually, I believe that that was actually a future event. That's something that hasn't been fulfilled. That's something that's going to be fulfilled. So you can see where, ultimately, yes, there are some things that you can agree upon, but then once you start exploring those things, that's where the area becomes a little bit challenging ultimately, and that's why, um, you see these collisions in axioms. That's why you see, although it sounds very, very good to talk about all the things that we agree about, ultimately, you're going to come to a place where there's some challenges there, and where you ultimately go, well, yeah, I believe everybody should, have this or that, but I'm not sure I would approach it the same way that you're approaching it. So I feel like that's unavoidable almost. Um, and I think that you can go down the list and go, yeah, we believe this, we believe this, we believe this, and this. But ultimately, you're going to come to a place where there's some differences and some differing um, theories, right? And some differing ways that you approach things. That's always going to happen. So how do you address that? How do you work through those things? Well, I think you do that through some of what we're doing right now, talking through it. And we could take a particular topic if we wanted to, like eschatology, the study of the end times, and we could start to have some of those discussions that we used to have, and we would start at these certain premises that we kind of accept, but then we start branching off, and the real discussion starts to happen. Now, I believe this, though. I believe that you can, because I was affected by it, because I didn't when we started having those discussions, as if you remember, when I told you, and I've told you a couple times that a couple times about the stories that you had mentioned. You had started exploring that topic on your own, and that's a whole nother background. But we were having a conversation, and I want to say it was at a Halloween party.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
That's
we,
not a
we were
place
having.
for religious discussion.
Yeah, no. Well, no,
That's a place
don't.
to have fun. Keep it simple.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about having fun and keeping it simple. You had brought up something to me because you were studying the eschatology and the preterist stuff at the time. It's just starting out. And you said something to me that made sense. That I went again without accepting the entire argument, but you had said one thing to me that I went, huh, you know, that would make some sense. That would actually completely be reasonable to accept. I mean, that's a real possibility. Why wouldn't it be? And from that point, um, that took me into another direction in my views on the end times and how you approach studying the end times, right? Because that's a big, huge part of it as well. It's not just a simple discussion. There's ways that you approach that subject and any subject when you're talking about like scripture and um or anything. But my point is this, that the the opportunity that I see for these discussions is that you can change people's minds, in that you can get them to see things in a different way, and you can affect the way that people view, the world or their existence or their experience. And you can change, you can help somebody have a paradigm shift. Um, and I've seen it happen, not only in my life, but I've seen it happen in other people's lives. And so I find these things valuable for those very reasons.
Want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
Mathematics is a whole history of people changing their minds via argument and long conversations. There's supposedly one story that's particularly interesting where a guy proved that the square root of 2 is an irrational number, which is most easily explained for those who don't know. Uh, a number is rational when you can write it as a fraction. So if you can write a number as a fraction, it's rational. The square root of 2, the question was, can you write the square root of 2 as a fraction? And you can get better and better approximations by trying different numbers. But a guy came along and proved that it was impossible. And I guess they threw him over a boat and killed him. But here's the thing. People have been arguing and reasoning their way towards different and better conclusions throughout the history of mathematics until we get to a point where we're at today, where we have developed it up and up until we have all kinds of theorems and agreements and all kinds of craziness. And the reason that matters is, how do the mathematicians do it? And I would say it's because it's one of the few fields of study where they have got it down to this idea of, here are our axioms. And with these shared axioms, what can we produce? And we can actually prove things statement by statement, going back to a previous statement or an axiom, and work our way up. And so it's really well defined, yet still, here comes the scary, really, really scary part, Ron, still difficult. So even though it's really well defined, it's still difficult to make progress. And over a couple thousand years, there has been made a lot of progress, but there has been arguments and changings of minds, and even, as you heard, someone being thrown overboard of a boat, supposedly. With
Mm-hmm.
that in mind, I have a real hope for progress, because I don't see any serious difference between this conversation or any conversation and that of the conversation that was happening within mathematics, other than the fact that in that context, it was clearer and it was better understood that you could make progress, whereas a lot of people feel like conversations don't make progress. And so what that means is, I have a real hope for people dialoguing, figuring out their shared axioms, working towards conclusions. Where there are disagreements, working towards understanding of those disagreements. And here comes the scariest part of all, it actually being a challenge to make progress, just like it's been a challenge to make progress in mathematics. But since it's challenging, I think a lot of people walk away from it, where we really could actually be making progress if we just kept working at it.
Yes, I agree. Um, which I think if our friend was
Dana? You mean Dana? I think Dana's around. Dana, are you alive?
yeah, maybe, well, we'll use her as an example. Let's say for a minute that Dana was not into these discussions because she felt like, well, they're not really profitable. It's more beneficial to kind of talk about the things that we
To paint
believe.
her nails and curl her hair?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
looking
paint her
at
nails,
her.
curly hair.
She's clearly not on the phone right now. Dana,
Hmm.
can you say hello? I just insulted women. You're supposed to stand up for women. Oh. You're muted, by the way.
Hello.
That was a very exasperated hello.
I just turned 39. I
Oh,
guess
don't tell people
it
when. Don't tell
really
people when.
it really hits hard all at once.
Oh, happy birthday. When was your birthday?
Top secret. Top secret.
Right now, we're living in it right now.
Oh gosh, is it your birthday today? Happy birthday.
It's
My
my birthday
gosh.
today.
Secret.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
Secret.
birthday.
Happy birthday. Wow. Um,
And
have
guess
you
who turned the 40
Oh
yesterday?
gosh.
Oh, big 40 yesterday. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, happy birthday, Jeff.
Oh.
Happy birthday, Dana.
Muchas gracias. So, I don't know. Jeff told me once he hit 39, he got really tired and everything started deteriorating. And I believe it. I fell asleep at 9 o'clock when I needed to be on the call, and I fell asleep again. And he was right.
Yeah, no, instantly you just kind of you accepted that premise and it was true. It turned out to be true. I
Jeff's
mean,
axioms become my beliefs.
Wow.
yeah. So, yeah, no.
Anyhow. Oh, sorry.
Jeff believes I'm the most handsomest man on the earth. So
Yes. Note, not by experience.
not by experience, but still, nevertheless. So there is hope based on that, most people will accept that at some point.
Oh. Oh, that's dangerous.
uh,
Anyhow, I interrupted you and everybody, but you know how late it is, Ron?
Yes, you did. It's very late. I'm so tired. I think my head's gonna fall off.
okay. Um, yeah. I'm waiting for the boosters to sound off so you can go to sleep, but it is late and you just turned 39.
Oops. Oops. Bye, Ron.
Bye, Ron.
Bye.